this video I'm going to be rebuilding the Spindle Moulder. The reason I bought it is because I'm going to start doing a lot of production chair runs, and for manufacturing those parts, a Spindle Moulder is essential. This one in particular is the Wadkin EP. It was manufactured in 1946 in the Green Lane Facory in Leicester. They came in 2-speed and 4-speed options. This is a 4-speed model. It goes from 3000 RPM to 4500 RPM to 6000 and to 9000 at the top. Most modern spindle blocks are only really rated for up to 8000, so I'll have plenty here. It has a 1¼ inch spindle and the motor is 4 horsepower. So I couldn't get access to a forklift, which would have made getting it out the trailer much easier. It was put in by a tractor on the farm I picked it up from. So the plan was, using a combination of a trolley jack, a farm jack, an engine crane and a 14-pound sledgehammer, to lift it up to the point where we could get the pallet out from underneath it so we could lower it onto a dolly. It's a bit more of a heavy duty dolly which I made myself, and then pull that to the back of the trailer onto the bed and then lift it up on the crane, bring the crane round to the back, lift it up, drive the trailer out from underneath the machine and then lower that back down onto the dolly so that I could put it to where I need afterwards.
Stop. Yep, down. That's me. Oh, sorry, it's good. Okay.
Now I'm just going to take it back off the dolly and put it on some blocks so that it's more stable to disassemble.
I don't like it.
These are spare spindles, replacement spindles. These are the twin fences. They can be brought into alignment to pass things across and used in tangent with the power feed to do long machining runs. They slide in at the back via a dovetailed slot and then clamp down. The fences can move in and out to adjust for different sizes of cutters. And this is the fine feed which should spin, but it's seized. This is the spindle of the machine, where the cutters are put on, the blocks and cutters. This is the brake, so you can stop the spindle once it's turned off quite quickly. This is the spindle lock, and the second lever locks the up and down, whereas that lever locks the spindle spinning. This is the height adjustment for the spindle. It's completely seized. This is the ring fence. It's a miracle this thing is still with the machine. It's a very rare part. And this is just a pressure fence that reaches over the twin fences to allow you to have downward pressure without using your hands. This is a dust hood. and a shroud to keep your fingers away from the spindle cutting action. This is the electrical cabinet.
That's not original.
This is the power off chute for the power feed. Power feed plugs straight into there, and then that runs on the machine's power supply. The unit was added in the 70s. When the machine was manufactured, they weren't available. It's a 4-speed unit, 2 speeds forward and 2 speeds backwards. The reason that they weren't available back when the machine was manufactured is because you couldn't get motors that small that were powerful enough, and therefore it just wasn't feasible. You'd have to have a massive motor if you wanted a unit like that on top of the machine back in the 40s when it was made. This is the isolator. And this is the belt slackening hand wheel. It's pretty jammed. I can't get any movement out of it. The fellow who was selling the spindle moulder also had this grinder, and he cleared out workshops, and I imagine this came from the same workshop and was used to cut the moulding profiles in the knives. So I picked it up as well. This is a Wadkin burst green grinder. There's 8-inch wheels and 1 horsepower. In the late 50s, Wadkin bought burst green and Sagar, so any machine which is tagged Wadkin burst green like this one will be from about 1958 onwards, until they rebranded again. A corded angle grinder with a cupped wire wheel. Makes quick work of removing all the surface rust and old grime that's been building up on the machine. And it's also pretty good at removing the old paint and all the extra coats of paint that people have given it over the decades. To shine it up and reveal all of the imperfections, I'm using a red Scotch-Brite pad and WD-40. The methylated spirits is just to clean all the grime produced by sanding it with the Scotch-Brite, so that I can properly look at the surface and see what I'm dealing with. And this machine's obviously had a hard life. These are scratches that have been filled in and then sanded back. This is a spot where I believe something chipped out, and they filled it in with wells and then sanded it back. There's deep pitting in the slots where the fences were tightened down and then left to sit for a very long time. Here you can see hundreds of dinks in the surface, probably from dropped tools and things like that. The ring of the ring fence is cast from bronze. Bronze is softer than high-speed steel, which is what the cutters are made of. So that if the cutters were to collide with the fence during use, it doesn't result in catastrophic failure. On this ring fence, there's evidence of this having happened on the underside. The twin fences are mostly held together with tapered pins, which are easy enough to get out if you hit the right side. I use the same method of WD-40 and Scotch-Brite and then cleaning it with methylated spirits. This fence has previously been dropped and the main casting split in half right at the right angle. Here you can see the dodgy weld job that's holding it back together. And when they welded it back completely out of square, which makes it pretty much useless. I'm going to have to re-weld this. These are the adjustment castings for the power feed unit after they've been cleaned up. They weren't in very bad condition, so it didn't take too long. Quick bit of space here. In order to get the motor mount off the machine and the spindle column, I've got to remove the way covers. motor mount is very, very heavy, and I use the engine crane to get it off.
Stop it.
I'm going to be using the grinder followed by Scotch-Brite pads to shine up all of the parts. Hell yeah. As you can see, it makes quick work of it. This is the spindle column. This bracket connects the column to the back motor, where it's directly driven by a pulley. This is where it attaches on the motor, and it's raised and lowered together. Here I'm trying to disassemble the spindle lock, as it's very sticky and jammed.
Bingo. Look at that.
This nut holds down the replaceable spindles in the column via this huge brass nut. I was quite pleased by the condition of this one. Whoever painted this last did a really bad job. As you can see, I can just pick it right off. I'm going to be repainting this, so I'm not too worried about grinding slightly into the original paint. The paint I'm going to be using will go over cast iron and also rust if it needs to. I'm going to try and get it as clean as possible and as smooth as possible before that. the main casting is going to get the same treatment as the spindle column.
Yeah, this tool again.
Definitely one for safety glasses, this. This tool has a tendency to throw little metal wires at you, and they can bury themselves in your legs and arms. So try and wear long sleeves or even overalls if you're going to be using one. And safety glasses, of course. As you can see, I put on a face mask. It's because it's starting to give me quite a cough and realise I should be wearing one. The dust being given off, I imagine, is probably a little toxic. The paint I'm using is a metal paint. The colour is Rouse 7011. My local Johnston's mixed it up for me. It's a metal paint and will go over old paint, cast iron and also rust if needs be. I did my best to get all of the rubbish off the casting before painting it. It's worth noting as well that I did degrease it with methylated spirits before applying the paint. But the reason I'm not painting this the modern Wadkin green, or at least what it was from about the 50s onwards, is originally it was painted this iron grey Rouse 7011. Rouse 7011 isn't the original paint spec, but it's what we currently have that's closest and seems to be quite accepted as a colour for this old machine. And in the 50s, the reason they're all green now, there was a machine show in Germany where all of the companies that wanted to display their machines at this machine show had to paint them green. Some sort of visual homogeny at the show, so to speak. And then this show became the basis for, or like the go-to for quality machines. And then mass hysteria kind of kicked in. People selling slightly older machines would paint them the same green that was presented at the show, because it made them easier to sell. And therefore a lot of the older machines are then being painted that green, as well as new machines being manufactured as that green. And over the decades people almost forgot what the original colour of the old Wadkin machines was, which is this iron grey colour. I masked off the only machine tag I couldn't take off, since this one was riveted on and all the others were screwed. All of the smaller castings got the same treatment as the main one. And it's worth noting as well, I gave every part 3 coats of this paint, with a day to dry in between each coat. This is the pulley cover for the spindle column. stops you from getting your foot caught in the pulley. I'm using Fiesta Red, which again isn't the original Spec colour. It's a little bit brighter than it would have been. It doesn't look like this in real life. It's a lot more diluted than it would be. On the final shots later, you'll see its actual colour. I did choose to do it this way rather than masking it off, because the blue masking tape is quite expensive and I quite enjoy this part of the process. These were particularly frustrating to paint and made me wish I was using spray paint in the end. If I was doing them again, I would use spray paint.
How long did that take you?
To paint the wheels.
Yeah.
Probably took 15 minutes per wheel, per coat. In 3 coats. I was very careful not to get runs into the bore. Should probably have masked it off. Spindle lock and the height lock are working nicely now. This is the brake, a hand-operated brake, if you need to stop the spindle quickly. We'll demonstrate this being used later. So we're now at the back of the machine and I'm putting back on the way covers, which keep the motor mount traversing up and down nice and parallel. The spindle column is attached the same way. This is the mechanism that raises and lowers the spindle and the motor simultaneously. So this is the mechanism that is it's the pulley tensioning mechanism, and it's mounted on the motor, on the mount that holds the motor in place. This is the wheel where if you operate it, it will slacken that belt. These 2 handles tighten and lock it in place so that you can't turn the wheel. This is the mount that the whole assembly takes place in. Alright, time for some before and after shots. These are all the adjustments on the power feed. You can see how they work quite clearly. This is a router collet adapter, so now I can put 1/2-inch router bits in the Spindle moulder and run it like a router table. The much smaller router bits won't work. I can't get it up to a high enough speed to get a clean finish. This is a French spindle adapter for this machine. Use of the French head was outlawed in the 90s because it was deemed far too dangerous. It cuts on the central axis, so every moulding profile you grind directly into the cutter is exactly how it comes out. You don't need to put angles and rake angles on it to compensate for an angled cutting action. Suffice to say, I will not be using this. This is how it would have been used. And what makes it so dangerous is an unsupported and an unlimited cutting action. And as you'll see this fella do now, you actually dive directly into the timber and pull it round and manipulate it with your hands on a tiny unsupported bed. Its use was predominantly for manufacturing handrails and complex mouldings on curved pieces. Here you can see that diving action. This was very prone to grabbing and pulling, and that hand behind the cut would be pulled in. Makes your hair stand up, doesn't it? It's pretty obvious why that was outlawed. This is a normal spindle. And these are modern legal cutters that you can put on it. This is an unlimited machining block, suitable for power feed, and this bigger one is a limited cutter head, which is suitable for hand-fed operations. Both of these cutters are made by Whitehill Tooling. This first one is an older model. You put on these spacers, you build it up to where you want it, and then a nut from the top is what locks everything in place. It's always good practice to keep the block as low as possible. This is a set of knives and limiters for this block. What the limiters really do is, if you was to get your hand caught in the machine, they limit the depth of cut the machine takes out of your hand. The powered feed unit has 4 speeds, 2 forward and 2 backwards. And you can tell by the sound of it that it needs a bearing race replaced. So I've ground and sharpened a set of limited flat knives. Using this micrometer, I can check their squareness from top to bottom by raising and lowering the spindle and comparing that measurement. And then I can turn it around, do the same thing for the other side, and balance the cutters accordingly using the micrometer, which is set on a magnetic base to the table. This is a basic shaping operation underneath the piece of timber, I've got a form, an MDF form, which is about 1/4 of an inch, and the ring fence, which is an elliptical fence, is completely plumb with the cutter at the peak, and you can vary the depth of cut by swinging right or left, usually right, on that ring fence. So if you've got a lot of material to take off, you can feather it in and not risk pulling the work out. You can also use this machine to cut compound tenons, straight tenons, or any tenon you can imagine really. This is a jig I made to cut 2 types of tenons, one at 8 degrees and then added 5.7 degrees for an upcoming chair set that I'm making. With these styles of jigs, this machine is suitable for long batch production style runs. And there you go, rebuild complete. And I've got a lovely machine to add to the arsenal. A true workhorse for the future.